Help me save her. She trembles endlessly. The small voice cracked through the darkness, and only one soul heard their desperate plea. An alarm wailed through the passageway, piercing as broken crystal, shattering the stillness completely. Marcus fumbled his wrench. It tumbled across the metal flooring, skittering beneath the heat-scorched panel. His breathing misted in the frigid, sparse atmosphere of mining station Theta's lower tunnels. Emergency lights flickered overhead, another malfunction or perhaps an omen. Everything in these depths blurred the distinction between failure and warning. He knelt once more, muttering under his breath as he wrestled the access plate open. The circuits within were damaged, devoured by decades of rust and abandonment. He should have been repairing the heating network, but even quality equipment was hoarded above by those with pristine footwear and unstained palms. A stray electrical arc jumped. Instinct yanked his hand away just in time. His fingertips stung. Cursed machinery. The odor of charred wiring filled his nostrils. He rose, flexing his hand, gaze wandering toward the ventilation shaft overhead. Heated air never descended this deep. The wealthy resided above in towers that hummed with artificial sunlight and polished metal. Down here, inhabitants withered in shadows, surrounded by abandoned technology and the sound of their own respiration. He turned toward the hallway, craving nothing more than home, rest, solitude, anything to silence his thoughts for several hours. Then her voice reached him, tiny, fragile like a whisper fracturing under unbearable pressure. Help me save her. She trembles endlessly. The words didn't bounce off walls, they sliced through, cutting past the drone of machinery and cold wind. Crawling through the ductwork, Marcus halted. The corridor ahead opened into a cargo bay, drowning in dim light and drifting ash. A crowd had assembled, more like a cluster of people in thick coats and protective helmets, half intrigued, half indifferent. No one approached. No one assisted. He stepped forward. A child stood barefoot on the frost-covered floor, clutching a woman who lay collapsed at her feet. The woman's body convulsed in steady, involuntary spasms. Her skin was deep purple, dusted with snow and grime. Long emerald hair tangled across her face and shoulders. The child's small arms trembled. Please, the girl whispered again. Please heal her. Marcus knelt slowly, his boots hissing against the ice. The girl flinched, pulling back protectively as if anticipating violence. Her hands were cracked from cold. She appeared no older than 6. The woman, her mother, wasn't fully conscious. Her eyes were open but vacant, staring through him. Her body shook with such force he could hear the joints clicking. But there was something else. Below her ear, thin luminous veins pulsed, softly, lines that flickered with a bioluminescent glow. Not natural, not biological, cybernetic. They pulsed too evenly, too mechanically. Her heartbeat ticked like code. Marcus lowered his voice. Hey, I won't harm you. The girl didn't respond, just tightened her grip. She's not ill, she said quietly. She was in the laboratory. They made her this way. The word laboratory hit hard. He didn't ask what kind, he knew better. He looked again. The woman's breath steamed the air in sharp, shallow bursts. Her skin beneath the purple tint was drawn, tight, malnourished. Her hands twitched with a pattern that wasn't quite random, a trauma loop, or something worse. Come on, he said, pulling off his coat and wrapping it around the woman's shoulders, tucking it close. She didn't respond to the touch, but didn't flinch either. I have heat. You need to get off this floor, both of you. The girl blinked at him. What's your name? He asked. Zara. I'm Marcus. Zara didn't nod, didn't smile, just whispered, please help her. He bent down and lifted the woman as carefully as possible. She was lighter than she should have been, too light. She didn't resist, didn't move at all except for the shivering. Zara grabbed his leg. She won't stop, she said again. Not ever. Marcus looked down at her, something in his chest cracking open. I used to think the same thing, he said, about myself. He led them through back corridors, down maintenance ladders and rust-streaked tunnels until they reached his quarters, a converted cargo cell lined with salvaged thermal panels and mismatched equipment. Barely livable but warm. He laid the woman, Vera, her name would be, though she didn't speak it, onto his cot. The tremors had eased. He wrapped her in thermal blankets, placed a heating element at her feet, activated the heat lamp overhead. The room buzzed with low energy. Zara stood motionless, staring at her mother. Marcus handed her a ration bar and a steaming cup of protein broth from his emergency supplies. She took it without a word, sat cross-legged by the cot, holding her mother's hand with both of hers. She hasn't spoken in weeks, she murmured, eyes wide. She stopped talking after the blue lights. Marcus glanced down at the woman's shoulder. Beneath her collarbone, barely visible, a small metal implant blinked once, then went dark. What did they do to her? He asked. I don't know, Zara whispered. She just shakes now, and she's cold even when it's hot. She doesn't remember me sometimes. He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. He sat near the heater, legs stretched out, letting the warmth bleed into his bones. He watched Zara feed her mother tiny spoonfuls of broth. Vera didn't react, but her throat moved to swallow, just barely. Small victory. The kind you don't see unless you're watching closely. Marcus leaned his head back against the metal wall and closed his eyes. He wasn't supposed to get involved. Not again. Not after the crash, the tribunal, the silence. But when Zara whispered, barely audible now, voice raw from cold and crying, please heal my mom, he knew there was no going back. Because once someone had looked at him the same way and walked away, he wouldn't. Not this time. Not again. The heating unit hummed like a heartbeat in the background, low, steady, a warmth that slowly reached into the frost-hardened bones of the room. Marcus sat cross-legged on the floor beside the cot, watching the rise and fall of Vera's chest beneath the blankets. The tremors hadn't stopped completely, but they'd softened. That alone felt like a miracle. Zara was curled up beside her mother, half under the blanket, her fingers loosely tangled in a fold of Vera's long emerald hair. She hadn't said much since. They'd eaten, just sat there, quiet, watching, guarding. She didn't move like a child should. Every motion was too careful, too measured, like she was afraid anything sudden might shatter something. Marcus reached over and adjusted the mesh panel on the wall. The heating was holding, at least for now. The power drain worried him. This setup wasn't built for sustained warmth, but he didn't care. Let the battery go out. Let the lights flicker. This mattered more. Zara's voice broke the silence. They told us it was for healing. He looked at her. She didn't lift her gaze from her mother. The lab, she said. They called it a therapy program. Said it would help her, that she was lucky. Her voice was flat, but her lips were pressed tight, the words sharp-edged. Marcus didn't interrupt. She went on. She went in shaking. They said it was emotional damage from the camps, from the soldiers. So they gave her injections and wires, made her stay in a tank of lights, blue ones. They said it would teach her body how to feel safe again. She swallowed, blinking fast. But the lights didn't help. They just made her colder. Her skin burned, and then she stopped talking. He wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but something told him not to, not yet. This wasn't a moment for platitudes. She started humming to herself. Zara continued. At first, just little songs, like she was trying to remember something. But then she stopped that too, and the shaking got worse. She finally looked up at him, green eyes, wide and dark at the edges. I think they broke something inside her. Marcus's jaw clenched. He forced himself to breathe. Outside, Zara added. They didn't want to fix her. They wanted to see what would happen. That's why they didn't stop. His hands tightened around the edge of the blanket. He'd seen experiments like that during the war, prisoners drugged for empathy suppression, civilians wired into sensory loops to study stress reactions. He hadn't been in the labs himself, but he'd flown the supply ships. He'd looked the other way. Now he couldn't. He glanced at Vera again. Her face was gaunt but peaceful now in the low amber glow of the heat cell. The blue flicker beneath her skin had dimmed slightly. Whatever tech they'd embedded in her, it still pulls mechanical, artificial, but not as erratic as before. She doesn't know where she is most of the time, Zara said, softer now. Sometimes she remembers my name. Sometimes she just stares. But when it's really warm, she gets quiet inside. Marcus nodded, staring at the metal scar just above Vera's collarbone. It shimmered faintly, like an old neural port. Military grade, probably. Black market tech. Those lights in the lab, he said. Did they ever stop? Zara shook her head. They said she had to adapt. That if she trembled, it meant the program wasn't finished. Marcus stood and began to pace. The cold from the metal floor was starting to creep up his legs again. He stepped over to the corner where his gear was piled, rifling through the satchel for something useful, more heating strips, maybe, or pain suppressants from his field kit. I tried to get her out before, Zara said, barely audible now, but I was too small to reach the locks. He turned toward her. She sat perfectly still, They caught me, she added. Said if I touched anything again, they'd erase her. Her voice cracked then, just a little a fracture in the ice. Marcus crossed the room and crouched beside her, lowering his voice. You got her out, Zara, he said. You did it. She didn't answer. He reached slowly, gave her a moment to pull away, and then placed one hand gently on her shoulder. She didn't flinch, just stared down at the trembling shape of her mother, the way her fingers twitched slightly in the heat. She used to have stories, Zara whispered, about trees with yellow leaves and rain that smelled sweet, places she'd never been. I don't know how she made them up. She remembered something, Marcus said, even if it wasn't hers. A faint smile flickered on Zara's lips, but it was gone in an instant. She always said humans were loud and smelled weird. Marcus raised an eyebrow. She's not wrong. She didn't think one would ever help us. Silence. I didn't either. That one stung more than he expected. He looked down. His gloves were worn thin. His palms still carried the calluses from a cockpit he hadn't touched in years. He hadn't saved anyone back then, just buried them. I'm not here to fix her, he said after a long moment. I don't know if I can, but I can keep her warm. And I can stay. Zara looked at him again. This time her expression wasn't guarded, just tired, but less alone. She'll wake up, she said. One day. He nodded. I'll be here when she does. Then Zara yawned just a small, slow breath and leaned her head against her mother's side. Within minutes, her eyes fluttered closed, her breathing slowed, a child's exhaustion finally claiming her. Marcus stood quietly and pulled a second blanket over them both. Vera didn't react, but her tremors continued to ease in small, uneven waves, like her body was listening to the heat, listening for safety. He backed away and slumped into the chair by the door. The cold still clung to the edges of the room, but at the center, where they lay together, it was finally warm. And for the first time since the crash, since the tribunal, since everything he'd buried under scrap metal and silence, Marcus didn't feel like disappearing. Not tonight. The first thing Marcus noticed was silence. Not the sterile kind that filled the long corridors of Mining Station Theta, where the only sounds were hums of dying power lines and the shuffle of tired boots. This silence was different, dense, almost alive. He sat in the chair by the door, arms crossed, eyes half-lidded. The heat cell cast a soft amber glow across the walls, making shadows dance behind the patched wiring and rusted panels. Vera lay on the cot, motionless except for the faint rhythm of her breath. Zara slept tucked against her side, one small hand resting over her mother's. Her chest rose and fell in the steady rhythm of deep, exhausted sleep. Marcus hadn't moved for hours. His back ached, his knee throbbed, but he didn't get up. There was something sacred in that stillness. Vera's tremors had almost stopped. He didn't want to break the spell. A low chime buzzed from the wall panel external sensor sweep. Someone passing down the corridor. Standard security drone, probably. He stayed where he was, body still, eyes sharp. They were safe for now. He finally stood, moving carefully across the room. The recycled water unit hissed as he filled a tin mug, sipping slowly. The lukewarm bitterness scraped the back of his throat, but he drank it anyway. Halfway through, he turned and froze. Vera's eyes were open. Not wide, not panicked, just open, watching. She didn't speak, but her gaze tracked him. Not a machine's blank stare, not the unfocused flicker of a mind caught in a feedback loop. She saw him. Marcus set the mug down slowly. Hey, he said softly. No response, but her eyes didn't turn away. He approached with deliberate slowness, crouching a meter from the cot. You're safe, he said. You're warm. That's all you need to do right now. Still nothing, but her breathing didn't spike, her muscles didn't seize. Her fingers, though faintly trembling, didn't curl defensively. It was enough. Behind her, Zara stirred. She blinked once, then again, sitting up slowly and rubbing her eyes. Her gaze darted to her mother, then to Marcus, then back. She's awake, Zara said, voice still from sleep. Her whole body tensed, like she was afraid it would vanish if she moved too quickly. Marcus nodded. Yeah, looks like she is. Zara leaned in, whispering something in their native tongue, soft syllables that rolled like water. Vera blinked. Her lips didn't move, but something in her face shifted. Recognition fragile. But there, Marcus didn't interrupt. She's not talking yet, Zara said, but she sees. I know she knows you. He met the girl's eyes. From the lab, from here, from now. That silence returned, not empty but full of unspoken things. Then Vera moved barely a twitch of her hand under the blanket, a breath that deepened by half a second. Her body was responding to the heat. The cell was working, but more than that, she was beginning to trust it. Marcus stood again and began checking the battery levels. The mesh was drawing more power than he'd hoped. He'd need to make a run for backup cores soon, maybe head to the old industrial strip at Dock 7 if the gangs hadn't picked it clean. Will she be okay? Zara asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. She'll get better, he said at last. But it won't be quick, and it won't be easy. Zara nodded, her face unreadable. Then she said, almost absently, that's what they said in the lab too. Marcus paused. But they never made it warm. He turned back, watching her. Can I help her? More? She asked. With your machines? He hesitated. You already are. She tilted her head. By holding her hand? That's the most important part. Zara gave him a long look then, in a tone far too serious for her age, said, you shake too, you know. When you're sleeping, your foot twitches. Marcus blinked. You were watching me sleep? You made funny noises. That's called snoring. She smiled faintly. I thought it was dying. He let out a quiet laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, well, you're not the only one who's had a bad few years. Zara's smile faded a little. Did you lose someone? He looked down. His hands were shaking slightly. He hadn't noticed. Yeah, he said. A few someones. Silence again. Then Zara spoke, her voice small. If you don't want to remember them, you can make new ones. I did. Marcus looked at her. I pretend there's another world, she continued. Not far, just hidden, where the lights don't burn and the beds are soft. She smiles there every time. He couldn't speak, so he just nodded, turning away, pretending to check the battery levels again. His throat had tightened too much to say anything useful. Behind him, Vera's body stirred once more. This time, her fingers twitched toward her daughter's hand and stayed there. It wasn't speech, it wasn't memory, but it was the beginning of something. Hope maybe, or the end of the freeze. Marcus didn't need to name it. He just stayed close. Then he remembered he hadn't fed them since they'd arrived. He crossed the room, grabbed a thermal pack from his gear bin, and tapped it twice. The foil hissed as the heat spread inside. The smell of rehydrated grain and protein paste filled the air. He tore it open and poured half into a bowl, then the other half into a second. Wordlessly, he handed one to Zara. She blinked up at him, surprised. For me? For both of you, he said. You've been out there too long without food. Can't warm up on empty stomachs. Zara took the bowl and carefully balanced it on her knees. He crouched beside the cot and lifted a spoonful toward Vera's lips. She didn't open her mouth, but she didn't turn away either. He waited. No rush. After a few seconds, she took the bite. She hasn't eaten since the tower, Zara whispered. That was a long time ago. Marcus nodded. Then it's time she started again, and he sat beside them, spooning slow, warm bites into a mouth that remembered how to take them. And when Zara leaned into her mother again, whispering something soft and silly about how the food tasted like recycled socks, Vera's mouth twitched a flicker, like the ghost of a smile. A ghost? It was still dark outside the module walls, though outside was a relative term on mining station Theta. The mining colony had no true sky, only layers of steel and reinforced dome plating separating the lower levels from the frozen vacuum above. Time passed by artificial rhythms, old clocks, maintenance cycles, the flicker of overhead lights on their own failing schedule. Inside the heat cell, warmth pressed close like breath. Marcus sat at the small makeshift table, piecing together a broken thermal regulator from spare components. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours, but he didn't mind. Sleep still felt like a luxury from a life he no longer lived, the kind with dreams that didn't claw back at you. Vera had eaten. That alone changed the atmosphere of the room, less like a waiting tomb, more like something stirring toward life. Now she rested again, head tilted slightly toward Zara, whose fingers remained curled in her mother's sleeve even in sleep. A few strands of emerald hair clung to Vera's cheek. The trembling had returned, but it was smaller now, softer, like echoes instead of shocks. Marcus placed the soldering tool down and stretched his back with a wince. He reached for the ration pot, ladled out the last of the stew, and crossed the room. Zara stirred as the scent hit her. Her nose twitched, and she sat up slowly, blinking in the orange glow. Is it morning? She asked, voice scratchy. Sort of, Marcus said, kneeling beside her. He handed her the bowl. You hungry? Zara nodded. then looked at her mother. She liked it yesterday. She might like it again. The girl took a bite, then another. This one tastes better. Figured I'd try real herbs, dried from storage. Don't get used to it. Zara smiled. You're not as grumpy today. Marcus leaned back on his heels, rubbing his eyes. Don't get used to that either. He watched her eat the way she chewed slowly, methodically, like each bite was being counted. Not out of manners, out of learned caution, ration training, hunger strategy. When she was halfway through, she paused and looked up at him. Do you fly? Marcus blinked. Why? You have a pilot's jacket. He hesitated. I used to. Why did you stop? A question said lightly, but her eyes were searching, not childishly curious, purposeful. Like she wanted to know whether he was someone who gave up. There was a crash, he said. I survived. Others didn't. Did you get punished? He didn't answer right away. He stood, crossed to the corner, and grabbed his canteen. He took a drink, then turned back. I got grounded, he said. That's the kind version. Zara tilted her head. Was it your fault? The words hung there. Marcus didn't answer. She didn't press. She went back to eating. Vera shifted, then a slight noise, barely more than a breath, but it made Marcus freeze. Her head turned toward him. Not all the way, but enough. Her eyes were open again, and this time they weren't blank. They were aware. Marcus approached slowly. He crouched beside the cot and held his hand out, palm up. Not touching, just offering. Her gaze dropped to it, stayed there, and then, almost imperceptibly, her fingers moved toward his. Not fully, not enough to call it reaching, but she didn't pull away. Zara told me about the lab, he said quietly. The lights, the pain, I believe. Her eyes flicked back to his face. There was no fear in them now, no recognition either, but there was something else. Listening. You don't have to talk, he said, or move, or even remember. I'm not asking anything from you. He paused, then added, but I'm not going anywhere either. Vera's brow creased slightly, like the words pushed against some hidden memory. The lights above caught the faint shimmer of bioluminescence under her skin, just beneath her collarbone. The implant still pulsed, but slower now, calmer. She had other names, Zara said suddenly, softly. Marcus turned. She used to call herself things in the lab. Before she forgot, she'd whisper them when she thought no one heard. Like what? He asked. Zara closed her eyes, trying to remember. One was Song of the Spires, another was Valen's Grace. I think they were titles, or old names from before. Marcus looked back at Vera. She wasn't born broken, he said. Zara nodded. She was proud, not scared of people. She used to walk like she owned the air. Silence. Then Vera's voice, soft, fractured, air-burned. Both Marcus and Zara froze. Marcus leaned in. Vera? She blinked slowly. Her lips trembled. Zara scrambled closer. Mom? Vera's hand curled just slightly. Her fingers brushed the edge of the blanket. Then again, her voice barely audible. Sky. Fell. Fire. Marcus felt it like a shock up his spine. Not from fear, but from awe. From something breaking open. She was remembering. Her mind wasn't gone, it had just been buried. You don't have to burn again, he said. Vera's head tilted in two. The touch. Marcus stepped back, gave them space. The room was still warm, the hum of the heater steady. The old mining colony beyond these walls remained a graveyard of forgotten people. But here, in this small, stolen pocket of light, something impossible was happening. Not recovery. Something older, deeper. Return. Vera didn't speak again that day, but she didn't need to. Her hand stayed resting on Zara's wrist for hours. And when Marcus sat back down at the table, staring at the tools he no longer had the strength to fix, he realized something. He wasn't repairing machines anymore. He was building something else, and it might be worth saving. The silence had changed. It no longer pressed like a weight in the room. It moved with breath, with thought, with warmth. It had softened. Vera's hand still rested against Zara's wrist. She hadn't spoken again since the fragment the day before. But her gaze tracked movement, now slower, steadier, like something long buried was surfacing. Reluctant, but inevitable, Marcus sat at the table, watching them in the dim glow of the heater. His stomach growled, but he didn't move. He was afraid. Even the clink of a spoon might break the fragile thread holding the moment together. Then Zara looked up. She's not shaking as much today. He nodded. I noticed. She sleeps deeper when you're here. Marcus rubbed his jaw. She's been through worse than I can imagine, but her body's learning it's not in danger anymore. That takes time. She doesn't flinch when you move around now, Zara added. That used to mean a lot. He hesitated. Used to? Zara shrugged. At the lab, when they walked by without hurting her, I'd pretend it meant something good. Even when it didn't, her voice was calm, but the weight behind it was heavier than anything a child should carry. Marcus stood and crossed to the supply bin. He dug through a half-broken case of rations and pulled out a preserved protein loaf. Not much, but better than nothing. He added water, activated the heater coil, and waited. The smell that rose was bland, but warm, familiar. He split the loaf into thirds, handing a piece to Zara. She tore off a corner and placed it gently on her mother's lips. Vera blinked slow and drowsy, then parted her mouth just enough to take the bite. She never let anyone feed her before, Zara said. Marcus sat again, slowly. She still might not trust me, but she trusts you. Zara didn't answer. Instead, she chewed quietly, eyes focused on her mother's face. Then, without looking at him, she asked, did you ever lose someone who didn't die, but left anyway? Marcus blinked. Yeah, he said. That's worse in some ways. Why? Because there's no ending. Just the part where they're gone. And you don't know why or if it was your fault. Zara nodded. That's how it felt when she stopped talking. I thought, maybe it was me, or that I wasn't enough. Marcus swallowed hard. He didn't want to say the wrong thing, didn't want to lie. You weren't the reason she broke, he said. You're the reason she's still alive. The words hung in the space between them like a bridge, fragile, but real. Vera shifted again, more deliberately this time. She looked at Marcus, and he saw something different in her expression. Confusion, maybe, or memory. Her voice came low and raw. This isn't the lab. No, he said. It's not. Where's the cold gone? Away, or at least pushed back. She blinked. Her fingers twitched beneath the blanket, then more softly. How long? 3 days since I found you, he said. She didn't react right away. Then she murmured, it felt like longer. It probably was. He wanted to ask more about what she remembered, about the lab, the procedures, the scars beneath her skin. But something about the way her eyes dulled told him now wasn't the time. So he said nothing, just let the heater hum and the warmth settle deeper into the walls. But even that peace didn't last. It started with a sound barely audible, a metallic knock from outside the door. Then a pause, then another. Marcus stood instantly, motioning for Zara to stay quiet. He stepped silently toward the door, reaching under the workbench for the compact pulse tool he kept tucked behind the scrap bin. Not a weapon, not really. But at this range it would burn through skin if he needed it to. He glanced through the empty corridor. Another knock, this time from the side wall. He moved to the other panel, peeled back a vent cover, and looked through. A message, scratched onto the inside of a maintenance duct. They're looking for her. His pulse kicked. Marcus, Zara's voice behind him, whispering. He stepped back into the room, his jaw clenched. Stay here, both of you. Don't open the door unless it's me. What's wrong? She asked, already pulling the blanket over her mother protectively. I don't know yet. He knelt beside Vera. Her eyes were still open, but distant again. Her lips moved. Without sound, as if some old loop had resumed playing in her mind. Vera, he said, can you hear me? A pause. Then, they're coming. He stiffened. Who? Her eyes turned to him, sharp and glassy. White suits, voices like glass. They don't blink. Marcus stood. Not security, not locals. Retrievers. Government-grade reclamation units meant for asset recovery. Trained for biological containment. Which meant someone had reported her or tracked her signal. She'd been tagged, and it was still active. He moved quickly to his workbench, yanked a knife from the side slot, and grabbed the old signal jammer he'd never thought he'd use again. It wasn't made for this level of tech, but it might buy them an hour too, if he was lucky. Zara, he said, pack what you can. Food, blankets, my jacket. We're leaving. She froze. We can't move her like this. We don't have a choice, but I'll carry her. Zara's mouth opened like she was going to argue, then she nodded. They moved in silence, efficient. The child had done this before, evacuated, escaped, survived. He lifted Vera into his arms. She was light to light, but she leaned into his chest without flinching. A small victory. He hit the lights, and the three of them vanished into the tunnels below mining station Theta. Not safe, not yet, but still, together, and not trembling alone in the dark. Chapter 5. The first dawnth morning she woke without shaking. Vera didn't speak. She lay still, blinking up at the low steel ceiling of the shelter. Her fingers curled into the soft weave of the thermal blanket. For the first time she didn't know how long her body felt quiet. Not paralyzed, not frozen, just still. The silence was not empty. It was earned. A few feet away, Zara slept curled against the wall, face buried in a bundle of folded clothes. Her breathing was deep, and even the child hadn't stirred once in hours. Marcus was already up. She could hear him outside, muttering to himself as he checked the perimeter panels. The low hum of solar coils being adjusted echoed through the rocks like distant insects. Vera sat up slowly, bracing herself on her elbows. Her muscles didn't spasm. Her spine didn't lock. When her feet touched the floor, they didn't tremble beneath her. Tentatively, she reached toward the small wash basin tucked beside the heater. The water was cool, collected from condensation overnight. She dipped her hands in. No panic, no breathless rush of old memories. Just water on skin. Her lips parted not in a gasp, but in quiet awe. She stood. Her balance held. Outside, the wind shifted through the canyon, whistling low between stone columns. The air was dry but not cold. The first fingers of sunlight crept across the cracked black rock outside the shelter's edge. Marcus glanced back as she stepped into the light. He didn't speak, just looked at her. Really looked. Her bare feet on the gravel, her posture, the way her shoulders weren't hunched like they had been, the calm behind her eyes. "You're standing," he said. "I am." "You're not." No, she crossed the few meters between them, without hesitation. He didn't move, but his shoulders shifted slightly, as if bracing for what came next. She stopped in front of him. The light caught the faded mark just beneath his collarbone, a scar she'd seen once, weeks ago, when he'd changed his shirt too close to the heater. "You were in the war," she said. He nodded. "A long time ago. You carried bodies. Some not enough." There was no anger in her voice. "And you still chose to carry us?" His eyes dropped for a second. "You didn't need saving. You needed space to heal. That's different." She reached up slowly and touched the sleeve of his shirt. Not a grip, just a hand, resting gently over cloth. "I'm not shaking anymore." His throat worked. "I can see that." She looked down at her palm, fingers spread across his forearm. "It doesn't scare me. Touch. Not now." "I'm glad." She let her hand fall, not abruptly, but with a quiet finality. "I want to walk further." He tilted his head. "Further where?" "Out. Away from tunnels. From shadows. From anything that remembers what was done to me." He gave a slow nod. "There's a pass through the ridge, to the geothermal basin. Not many go that way." "That's where I want to go." Marcus hesitated. "If we go that far, there's no coming back to this shelter." "Good." A pause. "You sure?" She looked back toward the entrance, where Zara still slept. "When she wakes," Vera said, "I want her to see me standing, and I want the first thing she feels to be the sun." They stood there together in silence, listening to the wind move through the rocks like a distant breath. Later that morning, Zara blinked awake to the smell of warmed roots and tea. She sat up, rubbed her eyes, and looked around. "Where's she's?" "Outside," Marcus said. "Come see." She scrambled to her feet and stepped out into the light. And there, at the edge of the ridge, her mother stood, shoulders back, hair caught in the breeze, arms open to the morning. Zara froze. "Mom?" Vera turned, smiled. The girl ran. Vera dropped to one knee and caught her in an embrace that didn't shake. "Not even a little. I thought maybe you'd fly away." Zara mumbled into her neck. "Never," Vera whispered. "I'm grounded now. With you." They held each other there, sun painting gold across their skin, and Marcus, standing just a few steps behind, finally let out the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. They didn't stay long after that. Marcus packed quietly. Vera helped. Zara filled her satchel with dried fruit and smooth stones she said were lucky. They left just before midday, following the ridge trail toward the open basin, toward whatever came next, and none of them looked back. Not even once. Chapter 6. The burning Signalthi reached the ridge just before dusk, boots crunching over scorched rock and wind-polished bones. The air here was thinner, drier too. The ridgeline split the world between what they'd left behind and what they had no name for yet. The geothermal basin stretched out ahead, framed by obsidian cliffs and slow-rising steam. Somewhere down there, hidden in the mist, was the place Marcus had found on an old mining drone survey and unclaimed zone. No beacons, no patrols, no eyes, he hoped. They set up camp in a stone hollow, half sheltered by a jagged overhang. The heat from below kept the rock warm enough to sleep on without freezing. Zara curled beside the fire, drawing idle shapes into the dust with a stick. Vera sat across from Marcus, her face unreadable in the half-light. The silence had weight too. It not awkward, just full. Eventually, she spoke. "I think it's time you knew what they did to me." Marcus didn't interrupt. He just listened. Vera's voice was low, not fragile, controlled, like a blade turned over in the hand. "I wasn't born into the program. I was taken, recruited," they said. "Volunteers from high-resonance genetic pools, empaths, sensory-rich species, those of us whose bodies knew more than we could explain." Her fingers drifted toward the old scar beneath her collarbone. "We didn't understand what they were after at first. We thought it was healing, rehabilitation, neurological recalibration, they called it." She looked up, meeting his gaze across the fire. "But they weren't studying how to cure trauma. They were engineering it." Marcus's jaw clenched. "They exposed us to targeted fear stimuli, withheld sleep, pushed our nervous systems past collapse. Then they monitored how our bodies responded, measured our dissociation, charted tremors like data points." Marcus's hands curled into fists against his thighs. Vera's eyes didn't blink. "They wanted to build emotional weapons, soldiers who could feel the terror of a battlefield and broadcast it back, amplify it, break morale before the first shot." "And you?" Marcus asked quietly. "You were their prototype?" She nodded. "Until I failed. My nervous system burned out. I stopped responding. They said I was useless. A cold channel." Marcus exhaled slowly. "And Zara?" Vera's voice dropped even further. "She was born in the lab. They bred her into it." Marcus froze. She wasn't supposed to live, just pass on the data. But something happened. She felt me, even before she had words. She would crawl into my cot and wrap her hands around my arm. It anchored me. Vera looked toward her daughter, now fast asleep near the fire, her chest rising and falling in a slow, safe rhythm. "When they shut me down," she unlocked the door. Marcus felt the breath catch in his chest. "She was 4. Vera smiled faintly. "She's always been more than they expected." A pause. Marcus swallowed. "And the man in the white mask?" Vera's eyes darkened. "He was my partner. Before the lab. Before Zara." Marcus sat still. "We believed in the same things once. Medical ethics. Cross-species healing. But he signed on with the directorate. Said we could change the system from inside." "He turned on you?" "He delivered me personally. Said it was the only way to protect me from worse. And now he's back." She nodded. "He's not the same. They broke him too, but differently." Marcus leaned back, staring into the fire, the flickers catching in the lines of his face. "So why now? Why are they chasing you again?" Vera picked up a piece of charred wood and dragged it through the dust. "Because I stabilized. Something they never managed before. My nervous system adapted. My body rebalanced. If they get that data, if they extract the memory logs from my implant, they'll have everything they need to refine the process. Make it permanent, scalable, weaponizable. And you're still traceable? Until I rip the core out," she said. "But if I do that too soon, I'll destabilize again." Marcus looked at her, eyes firm. "What if we do it safely? Controlled? I've got the tools. We isolate the chip, burn the transmission capacity without frying the neural lattice." Vera tilted her head. "That would work. It might hurt. I've hurt worse." He nodded once. "We'll do it tomorrow." She didn't thank him. Didn't need to. They sat together in silence, listening to the wind shift through the upper spires. The air was starting to cool, and the steam rising from below painted the stars in a strange, shifting glow. Then Vera said quietly, "Marcus?" He looked over. "I didn't think I'd feel safe again. Not ever. But with you, with her, I think I remember what it was like." Marcus's voice was almost a whisper. "And what was it like?" She didn't answer at first. Then she reached across the space between them and touched his wrist. "Warm," he said. "Nothing." Just turned his hand and let their fingers rest together, pulse to pulse, not trembling, not afraid, alive and ready. Tomorrow they'd burn the signal. Tomorrow they'd end it. But tonight, they just breathed. Chapter 7. The Severinthy began at dawn. Marcus sterilized his tools by firelight. Vera sat on the ground, back straight, her violet skin bathed in morning mist. The scar just beneath her collarbone glowed faintly. Steady, dangerous. Zara watched from a few feet away, her knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tight around them. Last chance to back out, Marcus said, voice quiet. Vera shook her head. No, more running. He leaned in, wiped the site clean with antiseptic, and opened the casing. The moment his tool touched the port, the implant responded, whining softly, like something alive and wounded. Vera's breath hitched. Her hand clenched the dirt. Marcus worked quickly, steady, silent. The port housing cracked open like an eyelid. Her spine arched, but she didn't cry out. Instead, she breathed through the pain. Her voice came low. I can feel it reacting, like it's trying to talk. Marcus didn't stop moving. That's the neural tether. It knows it's losing control. The moment he severed the last contact thread, a pulse of energy rippled through Vera's body, brief but sharp, like a static shock to the soul. She fell back, gasping. Zara scrambled to her side. Mom? Vera blinked. Her chest heaved once, twice, then stillness. No flicker beneath her skin. No signal. Marcus dropped the burned-out chip into a metal tin and crushed it with the heel of his boot. It's done. Vera sat up slowly. I feel empty. He met her eyes. You feel clean. A moment passed before she nodded. They didn't have long to rest. The signal may have died, but the trace it left behind hadn't. Marcus knew the directorate, it wouldn't rely on technology alone. They would send someone. Something trained not just to track, but to finish what began in those sterile white labs. By midday, the sky had darkened. No clouds, no weather, just the hum. It started low like wind trapped in metal pipes, then grew into a mechanical rhythm that vibrated in the bones. They're here, Vera said. Marcus took the old pulse rifle from his pack and slung it over his back. I count 3 drones, short-range sweepers. They won't send just drones. They'll send him, Vera said. Marcus knew who she meant. He checked the ridge. We fight here. We use the terrain, steam vents, narrow choke points, elevation. I'll draw them in, Vera said. Marcus stared at her. You're the one they want. Exactly. He started to argue, but she was already moving, not recklessly, deliberately, controlled, like someone who remembered what she was capable of. Zara reached for Marcus's sleeve. Don't let her go alone. I won't. The first suit appeared at the edge of the basin, white, faceless armor, sleek and mad, no insignia, just function. It raised its arm, scanning. Vera stepped into the open. The suit paused. Behind it, Timur emerged, then a fourth, then the fifth, taller, broader, its armor marked with a gold line across the chest. He removed his helmet. Vera stopped cold. Her breath left her body like a punch. The man who stood there had once held her hand in a lab, filled with soft, light and softer promises. Zara's father, except now his face was drained of color, his expression hollow, eyes like ice under glass. The voice that emerged was precise, sanitized. Subject designation Echo for 7. Return is mandatory. She didn't move. I'm not your subject. Return will be enforced. Final warning. Marcus stepped forward from behind the rocks, rifle raised. She's not going anywhere. The man's gaze flicked to him, then back to Vera. You were mine once. No, she said. I was never yours. I was a result, a test, a projection of your ambition. He took a step forward. You're destabilized. No, she said. I'm alive. That's not the same. He raised his hand. The white suits moved in unison. Vera closed her eyes and released. Marcus felt it before he saw it, like the heat shimmer off asphalt, but deep inside his chest. The air warped. The suit staggered. One dropped to a knee. Her empathic lattice, no longer caged by implants or regulators, flowed outward like light from a cracked lens. Not pain, not destruction, emotion. She sent them grief, years of it, her silence, her stolen voice. Every night Zara asked why she shook. Every time she said nothing. One suit screamed. Another tore off its helmet and fell to the ground, vomiting. Marcus raised his rifle and fired twice clean shots, disabling the last to still standing. Only the commander remained. He staggered, stepped back, clutching his temples. Vera stepped toward him, slow, unhurried. I dreamed once that you loved me, she said. But you loved what I could be molded into, not what I was. I was trying to save you. You destroyed me. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. He lifted his weapon, but his hand shook. Vera didn't touch him. She didn't have to. She looked him in the eyes, and he dropped the gun. The man who had once been her partner collapsed to his knees. Vera turned away. Marcus stepped beside her. He's not a threat anymore. No, she said. Just a remnant. Behind them, Zara ran forward, grabbing Vera's hand. You did it. Vera looked down at her daughter. Then she looked at Marcus. We all did. And as the wind swept through the basin, carrying the smoke of shorted circuits and broken commands into the sky, the three of them stood alone, alive, and free. Tomorrow they would find the valley. Tomorrow they would build something new. But today, they had chosen their fate, and they had won. Chapter 8. The Valley of New Names. The valley had no name. It wasn't on any official chart. The sky above it shimmered with soft gold haze, and low-hanging clouds hugged the cliffs like slow-moving breath. Trees wide-leafed and violet grew in tangled spirals up hillsides rich with moss and mineral springs. Pools glistened between the rocks, warm and shallow, fed by streams so clear the stones beneath looked painted. It was a place the stars had forgotten, and it was perfect. They arrived a week after the fight. No one had followed. No drones. No signal pings. The sky remained quiet, the air still. Vera had stopped checking over her shoulder. Marcus had stopped waking with his hand already halfway to a weapon. Zara found a cave set high in the cliff wall, overlooking the entire basin. The inside was dry and spacious, with a natural ledge wide enough to sleep on, and a firestone vein running low along the wall, radiating gentle heat even at night. This, Zara declared, spinning in a slow circle, is our house now. Neither of them disagreed. They built slowly, carefully. A lean-to for storage, a solar still for water, a trellis for the wild fruit that grew like stars along the rock wall. Marcus carved shelves from driftwood. Zara decorated them with seeds, bones, and glassy stones. And Vera planted. Her hands once weaponized by fear now pressed seeds into soil. Marcus watched her sometimes from the tree line, not because he didn't trust her, but because there was something sacred in the way she moved. Like each gesture was a reclamation, a quiet act of defiance against every lab, every needle, every voice that had told her what she could or could not be. She didn't shake anymore, not even in sleep. She breathed fully now. She sang while she worked low and strange melodies from a language no one else spoke. Sometimes Zara hummed along, sometimes Marcus just listened. And one night, after a long day gathering branches and sealing cracks in the cliff wall, he found her sitting on the ledge, legs dangling into the warm air, moonlight silvering her skin. He sat beside her. They didn't speak for a while. The wind moved through the valley in slow pulses, carrying the scent of flowering vines. I didn't think I'd ever make it this far, she said softly. Marcus nodded. Neither did I. She turned her head. You gave everything you had, so did you. You nearly died for someone you didn't even know. I know you know. She studied him for a long moment, then reached out, brushing her fingers across his forearm. The touch was deliberate, steady. Her voice was quiet but certain. I love you. The words landed like stone into still water. Not loud, not rushed, just real. Marcus stared at her hand resting on his arm. Then he covered it with his own. He didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. And then he said, I love you too. She leaned in slowly, and this time, finally, he didn't hesitate. Their lips met in the hush of the valley, where no sound but wind bore witness. It wasn't a kiss, born of urgency or survival. It was something slower, gentler, a binding. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. I thought I was ruined, she whispered. You were rebuilt, he said, on your own terms. Later, they lay together on the ledge, Zara asleep nearby beneath a blanket of moss and woven cloth. The stars above them blinked slowly, and the moon drifted lower into the hills. Vera's breath moved in rhythm with his. Marcus spoke without opening his eyes. You ever think about what comes next? She shifted closer. Every day. You want peace? I want purpose, she said. And this feels like both. He nodded. We'll stay. She kissed his cheek. You're my home now. And you're mine. Silence fell again, but it wasn't hollow. It was whole. In the morning, they would gather more fruit, check the traps, boil water, teach Zara to braid rope from bark. But for now, they simply existed, a woman no longer trembling, a man who learned to carry others without breaking, and a child who made them both better. They didn't just survive. They lived and loved. And finally, they were free.